guys.
Triplet Talk.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We made it. Episode, what, 3?
This is episode 3.
3 babies,
Counting
3
is hard.
episodes. There's more than 3, but.
There's more than 3. One thing I think we should actually talk about and mention is that if you guys want more visuals of the story that we're telling, because especially as we start getting closer and closer to the babies, because this episode, spoiler alert, the babies are going to be here.
Born.
They're going to be born. You can visit the Persichetti Triplets Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's persichetti.triplets,
Yep.
correct? We'll put that in the info. And you can follow along there. We do have a Triplet Talk Instagram up now, which is kind of just going to be showing more clips and things of the show. We also have a YouTube channel, so where you can see the video aspect of this. And we're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor,
We're there.
Google Podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
We're there. I don't know
We
why
got you.
I stuttered, but yeah, we got you. No matter what. So, I say we should just start with the episode right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go. Hey, everybody. This episode, we're going to talk about the C-section. So, yeah, interesting kind of adventure there. So, I guess like I was saying before, I was always kind of nervous about everything, and the C-section is one of those things where it's childbirth. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you're kind of like, I feel like a natural or C-section, it's gonna be nerve-wracking, obviously. But yeah, I always had a planned C-section. I never was going to attempt natural birth with triplets. My doctors that I was seeing advised that it could be very dangerous for the babies. So whatever the doctors advised, I was gonna do. I had a lot of people ask, oh, you can't even try to go natural, or I really didn't have any issue with it. I was willing to do whatever it took to make sure the babies were okay. So the day of the C-section, we had to get up super, super early. The surgery was set for 7 a.m., and they advised us to get there, I think, 2 or 3 hours before. And we had an hour drive. So, I mean, we weren't really going to sleep anyway. So that worked out. I think I actually did get sleep, weirdly enough. I think maybe God was like, one more time, get some sleep before you have 3 kids, because you'll never sleep again. But other than, peeing every second. But, yep, so we're up bright and early. We're driving there. We're really excited. Obviously, super excited. I think I mentioned in the last podcast that we parked in the parking garage and I walked in. I didn't want to be left alone. I really didn't want, I stand in the lobby kind of like looking around like, okay. And I don't know what had happened, but I was feeling fine. So there was no issue. And it was kind of a far walk once we were, walking, but hey, I made it through. So, it was kind of a crazy moment when I walked up to the, receptionist, and I was like, I'm here to give birth. I never really thought that moment would go like that in my life. I always picture like the drama and the running and we barely made it in time, and, being wheeled in a wheelchair and you're like screaming at your husband, but super calm. I filled out paperwork, like, Vince was hanging out with me. And then they were prepping me. I think it's triage. I'm not sure what it's called, for surgery, and, taking all my vitals, making sure everything was good. And shockingly enough, my blood pressure was high, and, it's like, maybe the fact that I've never given birth before, and I'm about to have 3 babies, and I'm about to be cut open, it's like, I think that would cause some blood pressure problems. But they were basically monitoring me to make sure my levels weren't too high, because if they were, at a too high of a level, it could be a risk going under with the epidural and everything. So we were kind of waiting it out for a little bit there. which once again wasn't helping with nerves. So I remember getting the IV port, which goes like in your like, or no, it's not your wrist, it's like your arm or whatever. And not a big fan of needles. I don't think anybody is. And the lady that was doing it, I don't know if it was really early or what was happening, but I usually don't look because I don't look at shots or giving blood or anything. And I kind of glanced down because she went, ugh. She did that like ugh, weird noise, and I looked down and my whole like arm was just covered in blood because she hit a vein or something wrong. And I was like, oh my God, like, try not to pass out. Like, what's happening? Like, so I was already on edge, and that was just like, oh boy. And she felt super bad about it. But yeah, I was like, this is why I don't look, for some reason I looked down. But yeah, that wasn't even that big of a deal, but it was kind of funny at the time, I guess. So yeah, everything's good. I remember these doctors are coming in, they're like, how are you feeling? They do ultrasounds to make sure. They want to do one last ultrasound to, make sure the locations of the babies are where they need to be. And everything looked good and everything. Are you excited? Are you ready? They're kind of hyping you up and kind of like, yeah, nervous, obviously. And I remember the doctor that I had been seeing that I kind of touched on previously, he came in and he was talking to me too. And that's when things are kind of getting closer to actually happening. And by this time, there's probably close to, I want to say, 20-ish people. Doctors, nurses, surgeons, anesthesiologists, more nurses, a lot of like OU, students studying med and just wanting to observe things. That was kind of crazy. A bunch of like, college kids like, hey, they like walk up, they're just like, hey, would it be okay if we like, observed your birth of triplets? I'm like, you know what? You'll probably never see it again. So, hey, go ahead, which would be so cool as a student to see that, a med student. I mean, come on. Especially from their point of view, not being cut open. But, yeah, so waiting around. I remember just that moment of waiting in that, like, I don't know what it's called. I think it's not triage, but it's whatever it is. You're waiting to go into surgery. And it feels like forever. It feels like time isn't doing anything. Time just, all the clocks broke. You're just like, okay, what's happening? And my parents actually got a second to come back, which was really nice. So they were excited. They didn't know if they'd be able to see me before I went in, and it was nice to, see some family and, hugs and stuff before, which was really comforting because, you do get nervous. I keep saying nervous, but it's a fair word to use in this situation. So, yeah, so it's, time to go in, and I'm like, oh, whew. They're wheeling you in and you're like, oh shoot, and at that time I mentioned time was going nowhere previously. Once stuff started to happen, it was like stuff was happening. I mean, it felt like we had 10 minutes to get the job done, and we were going to get it done in 10 minutes. It's like everybody knew their spots, and, I was kind of in this, like, not like relaxed, but it was early in the morning. I mean, you're not moving too quick at, I don't know what time it was, 6 or 7 in the morning. So I remember kind of sitting there, and they have to put in the epidural, which isn't a very big deal. I know a lot of things on the internet are going to tell you, oh my gosh, this and that. People have such different experiences with it. Coming from someone that is pretty afraid of the doctor and needles and anything to do with the doctor and needles, the epidural is the least of your problems, especially if you have really good doctors and nurses, because they truly, help make everything more relaxing and just, ease all your worries. So I remember kind of, you have to be in this like weird, your spine has to be at a certain angle. So you're kind of in this like hunched over position when they're doing the epidural, and it has to be in this certain spot and, all this stuff. And I remember you have to lay, there's a lot of different factors. You have to lay on this funky bed thing where you're almost like, it's like you're sitting on a horse and you're like bent over. So you're just super uncomfortable. And one of the doctors that was going to be assisting my doctor during the C-section was holding my hands kind of, straight out in front of me to help my spine. And I'll never forget it because I was so nervous. And he could tell. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Girl, you're about to have 3 kids and you didn't get your nails done?" And I literally was like, "Oh, wait, like," I just started laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh. It was just like such a quirky, odd moment that I'll never forget, because it totally, what epidural? I totally forgot what I was doing. And just like it was such a great moment to really, I kind of felt better about the doctor. I really didn't know his assistant doctor very well, but he was such a nice guy. I'm truly grateful that he was there in that moment and for the delivery of the babies, because, having a good team like that kind of really helps with more than you think it will. So the epidural's in. Cool, kind of got past that big hurdle that the internet really scares you about. And then the catheter has to go in. And here I am in front of all these, OU medical students that I just talked to, and they have their little notebooks up and they're just like writing everything down. And I'm like, hey, getting a catheter in. Like, I'm like, here we go. This is awkward, but I guess they've seen worse. So everything's good to go. We're ready to go. And at this point, Vince is not in the operating room because he basically is called in right as the babies are being born. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess it's just so that way they can make sure everything, like with the epidural and everything they need to get done to ensure, that the C-section is ready to go, happens before we pull anybody else in. That's my guess. I'm not sure, but that probably was another reason why I was nervous, because I was all alone in a room with like 20 people getting a catheter. But like, yeah, so I'm laying there and your arms are, straight out of your sides when you're having the C-section. And I hear one of the nurses, because then the shield goes up, obviously. There's some freaky people in the world that want to see you, would like to see yourself being cut open, and I'm not one of those people. So, the shield goes up, and I feel like they're about to start, and I'm in a haze because, obviously. And one of the nurses is like, "Isn't there a husband or something?" And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, yes. So Vince comes, obviously running in, and he's just the cutest, because he was trying so hard to make me laugh in that moment, because he's the best at it in the whole world. And because I feel like he just didn't really know what to say. What do you say to somebody like when they're giving birth? I don't know. So a surreal moment. He just kept throwing all these jokes, boom, 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 one after the other. And I remember I'm laying, getting cut open and everything, and babies are being born. And I remember before any babies were actually removed, Sophia, my firstborn daughter, there was a lot of like, it doesn't hurt. I'm not going to say the pain. There was no pain. it's almost like a pressure and emotion. Like your body is kind of doing this, you're kind of jostling back and forth. And it's not like crazy. I'm making it look like it's crazy, but you're not standing still and you're feeling something. And I felt like she took forever to be born. And I remember Vince is like still saying all these jokes at this point, and I kind of turned over and I was like, Vince, I'm not really hearing what you're saying right now. I kind of just need to get through this right now. Like, you're good, basically, I got, I'm good with the jokes for now. And then Sophia was born, and it was such a weird thing because felt like a second, it felt like, boom, baby, like, here you go, here's your daughter, and you kind of see her above the sheet a little bit, but it's hard to see stuff. And then boom, another one, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is just the craziest thing. And then boom, a third one, and I'm like still lost for words about it, because it's just, who the heck has 3 babies? Who does that? Like, who can say that they had 3 babies at once? So I had 3 kids in 5 minutes. That's pretty incredible, if I do say so myself. And I still don't believe it sometimes, but here we are making a triplet podcast. So they're born, and the nurses and stuff got such awesome pictures. I was so happy, because once again, you're in the moment and you're not even realizing. You're like, oh my gosh, wait, I need, these cutesy pictures that I see online. And I didn't tell them anything. I think it was Vince's phone they had, and they took awesome pictures, awesome videos of everything. Super, super glad, because I love looking back on it, obviously, but it's such a special moment. You can never go back. That's the first moment you meet your kids. Yeah. And so, I was able to not really hold them, but the nurses kind of put the babies around me. And I think Vince was holding either 1 or 2 of them. I can't remember. And then they had to be taken to the NICU, because they still were preemies, although at the time they were doing good. They were no issues, but they still had to go to the NICU to be cleaned up and everything routine wise. So they were kind of whisked away, and I was wheeled into recovery. And I kind of like almost sat there, and the doctor, Vince is following next to me, and the doctor says, you can, to Vince, you can go and see the babies if you want in the NICU. I had to stay there I think I stayed there for about an hour, just in recovery, making sure everything was going well. And so he ran to them. I mean, Vince was like, I gotta go. And I'm like, yes, please go to the babies. Because it is kind of a surreal thing. Like, you just had babies. You just had 3 babies, and you're not holding them, and you're not, there's not that like picture of like the freshly born baby like laying on your chest, or like any of that moment. Like, it's just, and I don't regret it. I'm not sad about it. It's just a different experience. So I kind of remember sitting in recovery, and the nurse handed me, and I posted it on my Instagram too, but it's their little footprints, all 3 little cards. And that really, really helped me kind of feel like I was that much closer to them, because it is hard. It's hard because you need recovery too after having a C-section. You feel fine while you're still on the drugs. And then after a while, and the drugs start to wear off, you start to feel it. Definitely feel it. The recovery is tough. I mean, you can't drive for 2 weeks. You can't lift anything really above 20 pounds. You really can't like stretch or bend, because you're just like, I remember literally being worried I was going to like rip open. It sounds dramatic, but like you get cut open, and it's just crazy, crazy, crazy. A lot of recovery, a lot of, not sleeping, and a lot of not being with your babies too, which was hard. They stayed in the NICU the entire time that we were in the hospital, and then they were in the NICU a total of 2 weeks, all three. My daughter Sophia came home a little earlier, but it was right around 2 weeks. So when you're in the hospital, they're not in the room with you. They're in the NICU. So you would have to go down in a wheelchair. You can't walk when you just have surgery, to go and see them, which was pretty tough. But I'm going to save that for the next episode, because I think talking about the NICU is something that not everybody experiences. And I think it would just be just like a really, really, really great episode to dive into. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up with having a C-section. Not that scary. Obviously nerve-wracking. Doctors help you through it. Your family helps you through it. Your husband makes jokes and helps you through it. And you get through it. And you get a really cool scar. And it's great. And think about it. You're in no labor at all. I mean, that's pretty awesome. There was no, oh my gosh, I have to get to the hospital now. Casually walk in, have 3 babies, and get on with your life. I was kidding. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up with that. So, cool. See you guys.
And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the father's perspective of this episode today. So, with my wife, catch everybody up to speed, when she was pregnant with the 3 triplets. 3 triplets, that'd be 9 kids, right? I don't know. Anyways, when she was pregnant with the triplets, she walked in the hospital like a boss, no wheelchair, no nothing. And she was like, hey, I want to deliver these babies. And it's scheduled and ready to go for the scheduled C-section. Awesome. There was a little bit of confusion. So we were actually there the day before because she had to get some additional testing and things done. And there was actually a little bit of testing that we had to do. I think they did a stress test with Charlotte. And Vincent and Sophia were fine, but Charlotte, they weren't sure. So she had to go in the hospital, and she got a wristband from the hospital to get these tests. And they said, oh, now that you got this wristband, you're kind of good to go, and blah, blah, blah. Awesome. Well, once we get there for the actual scheduled C-section date, it was all confusion. And they were like, wait, why do you already have a wristband? And we're like, well, we were here yesterday, and they said this should be fine for today. And they're like, well, no, the codes aren't adding up, and it's all this craziness. And my wife's like, well, I'm having the babies today. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's gonna happen. And I'm exhausted at this point, and it's just the beginning. I didn't know that I was gonna be more exhausted the rest of my life. But, yeah. I'm gonna even skip back a little bit before we even went to the hospital. So we had to get up super early. I think the scheduled C-section time was like 7, and they want you there by 5. And the drive was roughly 45 minutes to an hour away from our house. And of course, so if you do the math, let's see, you got to be there by 5, hour and a half. You got to leave by 4. So we're getting ready by like 3:30, right in the middle of the night to kind of get ready and then travel over. Leave at 4, get there at 5. Yeah, the math adds up, I think. And so, just as we're about to leave, our dog, Vincent, who's a golden retriever, he just decides, hey, you guys are leaving. I know you guys got a lot on your plate, but guess what? I have a lot on my plate. Dog vomit. That's right. He just puked everywhere. And so we had to do a quick cleanup, and which we later found out was he got into a plastic squeaky toy, and that stayed in his stomach for a while until he eventually had to get surgery to get the rest of it out. He's okay now. He's fine. But if it happens again, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to him. That's all I'm saying. It was more expensive than the C-section. So anyways, back to the hospital, right? So we're going to the hospital. She's a little bit worried about the dog, but she's like, I'm going to have babies. I got to focus. I'm like, yep, It's probably fine. I definitely won't have to pay for that later, which I did. So it's a little chaotic, a little crazy, and I'm just trying to maintain my cool, okay? So as you know from the first episode, wasn't the most steady-handed kind of guy, wasn't the most confident, had a lot of anxiety, had a lot of panic when I first found out I was having triplets. This is the day. This is the day they're going to come out. And so, I guess I should also mention this. So my brother and his wife had a kid before we did. And it was just one baby, given birth, no C-section, whatever. And so I asked my brother about it. I'm like, so what was it like? And he was like, yeah, it's terrifying. It's just, there's screaming, there's crying. Even my wife was screaming and crying. It's just awful. There's so much, you start to panic. You don't know what to do as a husband. You're just kind of standing there holding onto a leg. And but then you have the baby, and then it's great. Then there's peace, and it's all that great stuff. So I got really wrapped up in that whole like chaos and screaming and all that stuff. So this is all going through my head, as well as the fact that I'm going to actually have to like really, really start taking care of these 3 babies now. I can't just rely on my wife to do all the work, with her napping all the time. I'm going to have to actually, really start. This is where my life starts. I didn't pass out. I didn't freak out as much. But a lot of the stuff they were dealing with my wife, she was getting all her tests and blood and all this stuff and figuring out all the coding stuff while I was kind of in the waiting room. So from the father's perspective, I'm in the waiting room. And I just kept thinking, I remember they would always talk about back in the old days, the fathers didn't go in when the wife was delivering the baby. They just stayed outside, they were by themselves, and then after they did that, they'd say, hey, you got a baby, and they'd smoke a cigar or something and celebrate, They weren't, like, in there watching their wife scream and cry and all that craziness. And for majority of the pregnancy, I thought, man, that's the dream. That's what we need to go back to so I don't pass out. Because even the doctor, when we first found out that we're having triplets, he made a joke, but he was also serious. He's like, hey, we do have a chair with a strap for the fathers to where if you pass out, you still maintain in the chair, and then we just kind of kick your chair over to the side and deal with mom and the babies. And I'm like, haha, that's great. You should join my stand-up crew. He's like, no, I'm dead serious. That's what we're probably going to have to do with you. I didn't get strapped in, by the way, but I kind of had that mindset. I was like, man, I don't want to panic and freak out. Like, I got to be there for my wife. And at the same time, I don't want to freak out for my wife again, because this is when she's going to need me the most. And so as she's getting ready, I'm just like self-preparing myself. I'm like, okay, this is it. You can't mess it up like you did last time. Meaning last time I found out I had triplets, like this is the real deal. This is the end game. You got this. It is fine. We made it to the scheduled date. There's no crazy emergencies going on. The doctors are going to be here. It's fine. So as I'm doing that mental prep, eventually they call me in. So I'm going in to see my wife, and she's kind of in that, I don't know what it's called. I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's basically like the room before you actually go into the room for surgery. So it's the prep room, whatever. If you're in medical, you know it better than I do. So she's in this room, and they said that her blood pressure was actually very, very high. And she's been monitoring her blood pressure like crazy this whole entire time. Because if you have high blood pressure, there's a chance you could have preeclampsia, which could develop seizures and stuff. So she was constantly getting her blood tests and blood pressure checked and all that good stuff. And now they're saying that it's extremely high. And so now our scheduled C-section is delayed. Okay. And so we're just kind of waiting. Eventually her parents go in to visit her. They have some other people just kind of visit her, stop in, say hello, because you can kind of visit at this point. And, the thing is that her blood pressure could have been up because she was nervous. I mean, she's about to have 3 babies come out of her for the first time. I know I was fairly nervous, not passing out nervous, but I was like, okay, when is this going to get going? And so as we're waiting, eventually the doctor that we've been working with, he comes in and he's with some other doctors, and it's just a whole team of doctors and student doctors. I mean, this is like a big deal. Like, okay, this is the triplet procedure. There's just all hands on deck, and it's just a ton of people, right? It's just filled. I think we counted, and it was roughly in the 20s of just all these people around here. And I'm like, man, I hope I don't get a bill for all 20 of these people. So they're all packed in there. They're waiting. They're getting everything prepped. And the doctor comes in and he says, all right, Lauren, he goes, basically this is what happened. You got to the finish line, but you ran out of gas. Like, your blood pressure is very high. We're going to monitor it, but, give us some time and we'll be good to go. Like, today was your day. This is the day you were supposed to have kids, basically. Great. And so what they do then, once they said, okay, yep, you're good to go, we're going to do this, they took her out, and then they said, okay, Dad, we're going to put you in a separate area. So I put on the whole suit and the mask and the hair piece and I think gloves. I'm trying to remember. They get you all decked out in this attire to make sure everything's all sterilized, everything's good. And so I'm waiting out in this like waiting room / hallway thing. And I get to this point where I'm just kind of walking back and forth. I'm just pacing back and forth until they say, okay, Vince, you're ready to go. And that was I was super anxious at this point. Not going to pass out. But I was at a point where I was like, this alone is so stressful and so scary that I figured this is just not, I don't want to do this ever again. Like, this is just bad. Meanwhile, my wife's getting prepped to get a C-section, and I'm over here like, man, I don't like pacing. That's just too stressful for me. I just can't stand it. But so I'm pacing back and forth, which felt like an eternity. And finally they say, okay, okay, Dad, you ready to go? And I'm like, you just call me Dad. Okay, here we go. And meanwhile, as I was pacing and as I'm walking in to go to the room, I'm immediately thinking, okay, Vince, you need to have a solid tight 5 or a tight 20 of comedy material. You got to keep things light in there. You got to keep things funny. You're right. You got to make sure your wife is smiling and happy, and you got to, so that way that calms you down. You got to make sure everyone's having a good time. So I'm going in there and I'm throwing every cheesy, cliche dad joke I can think of. I'm like, this isn't where I parked my car. Like, just really just weird jokes. I don't even remember half of them. I just know that majority of them would have been great on a Netflix special. Just saying. And so I'm going to sit down and I'm telling her these jokes, and I'm trying to keep things light and fun. This is what I call a party type of situation. And my wife's just not having it. She's just like, can you just stop talking? Just don't. And then the C-section begins. Now, it technically was beginning as I was walking in, right? Now, we had a little drape thing that covered, so I didn't see anything going on, which was great for my sanity. Some people are saying, oh, you can have it see-through so you can see. I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't want to see that. I know it's a beautiful thing, but my brain's going to say your wife's getting cut up into pieces, and then I'm going to pass out. I'm going to panic, especially if something's like not going right or whatever. And I didn't look up any videos of it online, do any of that, okay? And so I go in. I'm giving my material here. My wife's telling me, enough. And so the craziest part was that it was so fast. It was so fast. And we sit down. I'm maybe 1 or 2 jokes later, they pull out Sophia and they go, it's a girl. And I was like, oh my gosh, there she is. She's right there. And that was at 8:16 a.m. Okay. Like I said, they had to push it an hour. It took a bunch of time, all this crazy stuff. Then 1 minute later, 8:17 a.m. Boom. It's a boy. It's my son, Vincent. And what does he do? He just starts peeing everywhere. Everywhere. I see him like up at top. They're holding him. He's peeing everywhere.
Everybody's laughing. I'm like, geez, this guy got better material than me, and he was literally just born right now. Come on. And so I was like, and then I thought, he's peeing everywhere. Like, everything's all open and stuff. I'm like, I guess it's sterile. I don't know. And so, they laugh, whatever. It's a boy. We go, his name is Vincent. Okay. So they take Vincent, and they wrap him up. And they had teams dedicated to each of the kids. So that's why there were so many people. Because there was like 3 or 4 people, if not more, per kid. And then we had our doctor that we had, and then we also had like another surgeon. And this guy, just like my doctor, fantastic. He was even joking around. He was having a great time. He was getting us pumped. And they were in and out super quick, right? And then 3 minutes later, which felt a little longer, right? Because Charlotte was really, she was high up there. She was high up to like Lauren's rib cage and stuff. And so, Lauren, on the other hand, is not screaming. She's not crying. I mean, she had tears of joy at certain points, but she wasn't, no screaming, no pain that I could see, nothing. She just looked a little discomforted, like her eyes were just kind of closed, and she's like, okay. There was nothing that was kind of like how my brother was explaining with his wife, where it was just a regular birth. There was no screaming. There was no panic. Everybody was cool, calm, and collected, which made me cool, calm, and collected. And then at 8:20 a.m., little Charlotte was born. They pulled her out. It's a girl. And they say, at least I think I used to hear from either parents or movies or something, that when the kid starts crying, you feel a sigh of relief. When the kid's not crying, that's when you're panicking. You're thinking something's not right. And you get scared. Is it a stillborn, or there's something wrong? All of my kids cried, and sure enough, that was the only time they've ever cried where I felt relief. After that, every cry now, I'm like, oh gosh, what do we got to do? All right, what's wrong? But at that time, you had a feeling of joy as they're being born. And so then next thing you know, they said, okay, now we're gonna put you back together, and that took the longest. Was just getting her back together. And I've told people this before. Ladies, if there's, you'll probably hear my wife's side. She might be a little more in detail, but I just know from the husband's side, I think that's how everybody should do it. I'm sorry. The C-section, it's quick, it's efficient. Everybody's good. You don't got to worry about a baby getting stuck, from what I understand. It was just a real nice, smooth process. Now, my wife's recovery was long, though. So, and we'll probably go, she'll either explain that now, or we might go into that during when we talk about the NICU in the next episodes. But that was obviously, you're recovering. That's obviously kind of a downside. And she went through a lot of that for recovery. But, I mean, other than that, you think C-sections are kind of scary and terrifying, and like I said, my wife wasn't like screaming in pain. She didn't really even feel anything. It was super quick and super just efficient, and the babies came out, and the babies were doing great. So after they took the babies out, they got them all cleaned up and good to go. I didn't cut any umbilical cords with the triplets. Really wasn't people, they kept telling me, yeah, you got to cut it. It's like cutting a rubber hose. And that just didn't happen for me. I think just because there were so many babies, you got to get them in and out, and you got to clean everything up. That it's just they handled all of that, which I think was fine, because I didn't know if I wanted to go to the other side and like cut it while also see my wife open and stuff. I think that would have freaked me out a little bit. And so they all come wrapping up, and these nurses come in, and they're like, all your babies are doing great. None of them need any breathing as of right now. Like additional oxygen type stuff, we're going to show them to you. And I'm like, wow, this is great. So they hand me Vincent first. I believe it was Vincent first. And then they hand me Sophia. So now I'm holding both of them. And they're like, wow, it's great. And they're like, yeah, and then here's Charlotte. And I'm like, I only have 2 hands. So they're like, oh, okay. So they just kind of held Charlotte like next to him. And then we had another nurse who took my phone and just took a bunch of photos, bunch of really great photos and pictures. which was awesome. But it was a weird moment because I was like, oh crap, I can't hold all 3 of them, which later on I would learn to be able to. But at the time I was like, oh crap, like, yeah, there's 3 and I can't hold them all. And so to wrap it up, I was very nervous, obviously, at first. And once we went in and once we started to actually do the C-section, it was super smooth. It was super great. You know, everybody was calm, cool, and collected. And it was incredible to see my kids for the first time. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm gonna end it there. I want to end it right before we get to the NICU part. So that's my perspective.
And we're back.
Hey,
We
you
are
made it.
back. We made it.
Made it.
So, after listening to yours,
Okay.
I noticed that you truly understood the art of my stand-up comedy that day,
I mean,
which is great. Because I felt like for mine, I was like downplaying, like, it wasn't that good. And you were just like, listen, this was the best stand-up of all time. That's what I heard. I don't know.
it was so good that I had to just say stop because
Stop.
it's too good. My ears are not ready.
You
for
have
this
me
kind
in
of comedy yet.
stitches, and the surgery isn't done yet.
Yes.
And you already have me in stitches.
Exactly.
So now for the previous episode, you said, I got some brownie points. So did I end up losing all my brownie points by you talking about how great I was? Or how does the brownie point
No.
exchange work? Can I still use
Did
my
I
brownie
gain
points?
brownie
for later?
points by talking
Yeah, you
about?
did.
Yeah,
You did.
so we're equal.
Okay, good.
No
Good.
more brownies. We're just everybody's
more
got
brownies.
brownies and
Everybody's got
we're all good.
brownies.
Nobody owes anybody brownies.
Because when everyone has brownies, no one does. I don't know. Incredibles or something.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, it seems like we kind of went through a lot of the point by point plot points together pretty well.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna talk about the whole mishap with how everybody they like mixed up with the bracelets, all that.
I thought for sure you would, but I was like, I'm gonna cover it.
I just knew I'm like, there's so much to talk about, and it really didn't even matter. Like now I think back and I'm like, it's like irrelevant, I guess, to the birth story. It was really frustrating at the time, but
yeah, I thought I had a good conflict to the story.
you did.
I
No,
didn't
I'm
want to
glad.
make it this smooth. It was a wonderful day in the pedals because we kind of set that up before. Like you just walked in. I'm like, yeah, you walked in. Everything was great until dun,
The
dun,
most
dun.
frustrating part about that whole thing was I went, like, basically I had to go to the doctor. It was, I think, every day that week leading up to the C-section. So we were making sure everything was good. Yep, everything looks good. Everything looks good. And it was, I think it was 24 hours before I was going to have the C-section. I had to get blood work done. So that way they could check if all my levels were good and everything was good. So that way when I go in, they wouldn't have to do it. So it was all supposed to be like proactive, let's get it done, right? So, we're busting our butt trying to get, because we had to go to a different doctor office and it was this whole process. We had to wait in a waiting room. We had to do all this stuff all over again. And I got a bracelet, which it's those bracelets you get when you're admitted to the hospital.
Yeah.
I feel like you didn't elaborate on that as much, but
I said you got a bracelet.
It was a bracelet, had my name on it and like a barcode and all that, and I didn't think much of it. I thought, whatever. And apparently, when I got there morning of my C-section, and I already had a bracelet on,
They thought you escaped from
they
the
had no
hospital.
idea why I had it. It was like the most confusion. It was like, why do you have a bracelet? This bracelet doesn't match this other bracelet. And we're just going to keep saying bracelet. And like, I was just, I don't care. Do your job. Figure it out. I'm having 3 kids. I'm not even thinking about bracelets right now.
Dang straight.
You're taking
Don't care about
this-
no bracelets.
Yeah, I'm not here for bracelets. I don't
Not
care.
here for the
Figure it out.
bracelets. Here for the babies, not for
And
the
it was
bracelets.
frustrating because they had to do all that blood work again
Yeah.
because those people screwed up the numbers on the. We're not even going to talk about it anymore.
We're not gonna
because
even talk
they're not
about
worth our time.
No.
No.
Luckily, they weren't the ones delivering the babies because the doctors that we had were awesome.
They were so great.
And the assistant doctor or the main whatever,
Yeah.
I believe his name was Dr. Koo.
Mm-hmm.
He was fantastic.
Yeah.
He
so
was great.
funny, such a nice guy. I mean, great.
He,
I wish I would have met him more. And funny enough, he walked into when I was being prepped, and he was like, how come I haven't met you before? Because he usually sees all the moms that have multiples because they're coming into the doctor so much because of, they're having contractions, they're having certain issues where they need to be monitored or stress tests and all that. I didn't have any of that. So he was like, how the heck did you not have any of that? And I'm just like, no idea, but
no clue.
I'm glad I'm meeting you now because that guy was so awesome. I was so glad that he was there.
Yeah, he was fantastic. He just made it fun, and he got the job done super quick. I was mind blown of how quick that whole process was. I mean, it was just a matter of minutes. It was like boom, done, boom, done,
it was like
boom,
a machine.
Done.
Like everybody had their little. I mean, when they're prepping you because they're like, when we're done, we're going. Like we're not gonna like, okay, we're not gonna walk you through. No, they put their game face on, and they're going. Yeah.
Just a matter of minutes. You're thinking, okay, I'm being there for an hour, 3 hours. I'm being there for 10 days. I don't know, but minutes. It's crazy, and he's doing it all with a smile on his face. You couldn't really see much with the mask, but I could tell by his tone he was smiling.
Oh yeah.
He was a guy who just generally loved doing what he was doing, and he did a great job. He also, which you didn't mention, I don't know if you need to mention it, but you were talking a little about your scar. He had you sewed up so nice. He said you could actually even do a delivery birth if you ever had any more kids. You don't have to do like C-sections for the rest of your life because he sewed it up quite nicely and everything was all.
Yeah, vaginal birth after C-section.
Yeah.
That could happen. Yeah. Yeah, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that's common, but it was good information.
I don't know, but when he said that, it felt he made it as if like, this is a rare find. This doesn't happen a lot.
And my scar is only like this big. I know if you're not watching a YouTube video. And that's probably not even right. It's like...
It's small.
Maybe
you're
2
thinking,
inches?
I'm thinking... I thought it was going to...
Maybe this big?
I thought your stomach was going to look like the mouth from the Joker.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight. I got these scars, and you just lift up your gut.
Oh, God.
But, I mean, it's... it's late. But, yeah, no. It's so small. You're like, there's no way you could put a hand in there, let alone babies coming out of there. But... I mean, it's
and our
doctor
doctor was kind of like, yeah, they said I should probably make a bigger incision, but I was like, nah, I can figure it out. And I'm like, well, do what's best, but thanks, I guess. I don't know how to respond.
Yeah, it was nuts. And it's not like any of the babies had any issues coming out. I mean, it was just all around.
No, I just remember back to you talking about when you came in and you were just like, joke. You're just on a mission, and I couldn't even tell you what day it was. I was just so in a haze, and it wasn't even like being on like medication or anything. I mean, what you're not seeing anything. You know what's happening. You're being cut open, and you're about to deliver 3 babies. I mean, my head was like spinning, and Vince comes in, and he's like trying to be this nice guy, and I was just like, just for a second, like just.
I did it as a distraction. I was trying to be a good distraction for you. I was trying to be a good distraction for me. Also, the doctor had really good comedy routine, so I'm like, okay, I got to compete. I see what's going on here,
It was a turf war.
It was a turf war.
You had to defend your turf.
Yeah. I mean, technically it was his turf, but
That's true.
You were there. My children there.
Yeah.
I can't have my kids born. The first thing they see is, oh, wow, my dad's getting out-clowned by this doctor. Can you be my dad, Dr. Koo? There's so much fun here. I don't know.
I feel like we just brushed over the fact that we just had 3 kids. But
yeah, that's what we do.
All the time we just talk about how crazy everything was, and for some reason that felt not crazy.
Yeah, it was very organized.
Everything was
structured.
planned and everything was ready, and like people knew what they were doing, and it felt like people knew what they were doing. So it was kind of refreshing in a world that we've been living of just this like unknown chaos of like we don't know what's happening, and it was this moment of like like you can kind of enjoy the fact that we're parents, and now we have 3 kids and they're healthy, and we're ready to start this life with them.
Yeah. And little do we find out, we weren't really that ready.
No, how can you be?
You can't be.
No. But
we'll talk more about that in some more episodes.
We're going to get some sleep.
We're going to
come back and we'll be more awake.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye, guys.
See ya.